What is up, guys? Rick Kakis here, and today we're going to be discussing the 4 main things that the Age of Triumph needs to have. Now, the Age of Triumph is the newly announced content offering hitting Destiny sometime at the end of March. Now, these 4 things, I believe, are extremely important for Bungie to nail in the Age of Triumph. And it's not like I'm sitting there coming up with these ideas by myself going, brilliant, I found the key thing that will fix Destiny forever. That's not exactly what I'm saying. These 4 things I've advocated for in the past, other content creators have advocated for them, and I'm sure you guys have thought of these by yourselves. These are just 4 things that will really help improve the state of Destiny, and nothing should really surprise anyone. So hopefully Bungie will nail these 4 things. And guys, if you agree with what I'm saying in this video, please remember to support the video by liking, commenting, and especially sharing. It really does help me out, and it's a great way to let Bungie know that you support these kind of ideas. Anyway, guys, these 4 things, let's start out with number 4. I was going to make a top 5 list, but couldn't think of 5 things. There's just 4 important things. Let's start with number 4 here, and this is going to sound simple, but there's a little bit more to it. It's more activities, especially for the end game. Now, Destiny right now, I really believe, needs more activities. What are you doing right now? Like, if you log on Destiny, what is there to do? Well, right now, there's the Iron Banner. That's kind of a special event. So, you could play the Iron Banner, you could play normal PvP, you could do the raid, I suppose, and you could do strikes, and maybe the Nightfall. Now, those things don't really change from week to week. Every single week in Destiny, you have the option of doing PvP, strikes, or the raid. And that's pretty much it. Now, of course, there are some more activities out there. Prison of Elders does still drop infusible loot, etc., but most people are sticking to the things I mentioned. Destiny really needs to make available more activities that are going to give people more things to do. Here is a great example of this, and I mentioned it before. Prison of Elders. Prison of Elders is just a few changes away, a few pieces of desirable loot away from being an actual weekly activity that people are going to spend time in. And in fact, during the announcement of the Age of Triumph, in the weekly activities slide that you can see here, they showed off the symbol second to the right of the Prison of Elders. So it looks like Bungie is kind of introducing that or changing that in some way to make it a weekly activity similar to perhaps the Nightfall, which is awesome. That is exactly an example of introducing more activities, giving Destiny players more things to do. But I think another great example, and seriously guys, smash that like button, leave in the comments down below if you think this is a good idea, but I would really love to see story missions made more relevant. There are so many areas in Destiny. There is so much content in Destiny that is involved in these story missions that most people never play. Like, you go through the story missions once, maybe once per character, and that's about it. And even if you are one of the few people that are playing the daily story missions every single day, that is just giving you a tiny subsection of, again, the massive amount of content locked behind these story missions. I would love to see a weekly story mission, or perhaps a weekly set of story missions where you play 2 or 3 in a row that are upped to a greater light level and have perhaps modifiers like Nightfall level modifiers and reward substantial loot. That would be awesome. How about story mission exclusive loot? Now, of course, in a perfect world, maybe they would introduce weapons or armor behind each different story mission. That would be absolutely awesome, but more realistically, what Bungie could do is add a weapon for each planet. Like, you would have a Venus exclusive rocket launcher, and that was only accessible as a random drop for beating a story mission on harder difficulties, perhaps on Venus. Like, There you go. You've just made story missions relevant again. And then there would be an auto rifle on Mars, perhaps a scout rifle on Earth, etc. That would be awesome. Imagine if there was a weapon as desirable as the Imago Loop hand cannon, which people will farm for and farm for and farm for. Imagine if that type of weapon was available as a Mars exclusive story weapon. People would be playing tons of missions on Mars. There you go, you've made so much content in the game relevant again. So in the Age of Triumph, it looks like Prison of Elders is making a return, and there's actually substantial evidence showcasing that perhaps the Year 1 raids, like the Vault of Glass and Crota's End, will make a return as well. Those things are fantastic in nailing this point. If they actually do those things, we're going to have so much more activities to choose from. But I hope they go the extra mile and do something akin to what I've mentioned with the story missions as well. And of course, just more completely new activities would be great as well. I've always been advocating for some sort of wave defense mode, but that's unlikely to be added in a free update. However, these other things, just changing slightly and updating story missions perhaps, that is a very simple thing to do in the grand scheme of things. However, Bungie could add 100 new activities, but they would all mean jack shiz if there isn't actual loot behind them. And that's why point number 3 that the Age of Triumph needs to nail is that there needs to be substantial new loot. Now, what do I mean by substantial new loot? I mean more than what they did in the Dawning. If you look at the Dawning, that is a classic example of adding the bare minimum of loot, essentially. They didn't add any new weapons. That is a huge mistake, especially because of how the current armor and weapons system are laid out in Destiny. Armor isn't really that much different from other armor, aside from the actual appearance. And new Dawning armor definitely looks cool, but it's spawning with the same exact perks as other armor, and most people are just going to be looking at what perks it spawns with and the actual stat rolls. So as long as you get an Iron Banner armor piece, for example, that has the perfect stat roll and the exact perks you want, you're likely not to switch it with a worse stat roll Dawning armor piece, even if it looks cooler. Now, yes, people are probably going to collect them, but it just doesn't matter as much as adding new weapons. Look at what happened when new weapons were added with the Rise of Iron. The Clever Dragon, the Palindrome, these things made pretty big waves throughout Destiny. That is the impact that you have from adding new weapons into the game. What new differences, what waves did the armor added in the Rise of Iron actually make? Like, seriously, basically none. Yes, it's cool, yes, it's better armor, some had decent perks, but when we're talking about impacting Destiny for the better and adding new loot, we've got to talk about weapons. That is like the key factor in making people play the game. That is the key focus of most people in the game, is going after weapons rather than necessarily armor. With that being said, adding a bunch of reskins isn't going to be that impactful. I really hope Bungie differentiates this new loot, and again, that goes into the substantial part of substantial new loot, and maybe add some new weapon perks. They could add some cool new perks on fusion rifles, maybe on auto rifles, whatever, that the new loot spawns with, and suddenly, wow, people are taking a huge interest in the new loot. Even if it turns out that that particular new perk isn't that competitive, people are still going to have a very desirable view of a new perk, trying to get it, trying to try it out, see what circumstances it might be good at, or see what builds it might work with, etc. Adding new perks into the game is a very exciting thing, and it hasn't been done since the Taken King, which is ridiculous. If you guys want an example, add a new perk for auto rifles that increases the damage but substantially lowers the stability. There you go. I guarantee a lot of people would be very interested in trying that new perk out, seeing what auto rifles it works on, what archetypes you could make it work, because increasing the damage is a huge thing, but also having the stability, for example, is also a pretty huge downside. So you want a perk that would differentiate the loot system a ton? Boom, there you go. That is a great example of one. Now, continuing on this topic of loot, another thing that the Age of Triumph needs to nail is point number 2, loot to grind for. Now, what exactly does that mean, loot to grind for? Well, it's simply this. You're having these new activities perhaps, and you're having decent new loot. But if you just add loot randomly into the loot table, and it's all just behind engrams, that doesn't feel very special. You need to have actual loot tied to activities, and that's kind of what I was getting at before with the whole story mode exclusive loot. A great example of how Bungie didn't nail this point and how it kind of came back to bite them is with the new strikes added in the Dawning. There was one entirely new strike, well, I shouldn't say entirely new, one remade strike with the Nexus Mine strike, and then 2 updated Sivified strikes. None of those had loot to grind for. If they would have added new strike exclusive weapons to those 3 strikes, that would have been fantastic. People would have been playing way more strikes trying to get those 3 new weapons. But unfortunately they didn't, and the shelf life of those strikes was pretty limited. Not many people were that interested in going and getting the Titan Mark that came with the Nexus Mine strike. But again, just imagine if they had added a new strike exclusive weapon with the power level of the Imago Loop behind the Nexus Mine. Now I know the Imago Loop is actually the strike exclusive weapon that you can get behind the Nexus Mine, but at this point a lot of people already have it. And the fact that it's available in 3 different strikes now means that it is entirely not very special anymore. So if they had added a new auto rifle that had really good rolls, that was like up there with the Shadow Price, suddenly, whoa, people are playing the Nexus Mine every time it's the Nightfall. People are grinding that stuff, trying to get good rolls on that auto rifle. You've made that strike, you've made the activity so relevant. The one place that Bungie did do this with the Dawning was with the Icebreaker exotic sniper rifle. I think adding that into the game and putting it behind Nightfalls was a great idea. I think maybe the RNG should have been a little bit more forgiving because right now it's pretty damn hard to get. But seriously ask yourself this question. How many Nightfalls would you have played if the Icebreaker wasn't added back in the Dawning in the way it was? I guarantee you would have played nowhere near as much. And this is a great example of how desirable loot, how adding loot to grind for can increase playability in Destiny. So many more people played the Nightfall so much more because there was a desirable loot piece behind it. I hope Bungie adds more things like this. Not necessarily everything gated behind RNG, that's not what I'm saying, but more exotic weapons, more strike exclusive weapons, more good weapons that are behind activities that actually gives you a reason to play Destiny. Now moving on, point number 1, something that I think is absolutely essential is more vault space. Now this may sound kind of weird. Why am I putting this at literally number 1 place? Well, it's not actually because it's the most important. If you were to really ask me, I would rather have, more activities and substantial more loot over more vault space. However, if any of the other points, if any of those other things are actually done, this becomes an issue. If Bungie is really looking to add the old raids, Vault of Glass, Crota's End, back into the game, and if they are updating them and having Sivified infusion-based versions of their loot tables, could you imagine what that's going to do to our vault space? Oh my gosh, I'm full now. I have every single character almost maxed out, like 8 or 9 out of 10 places in my inventory, and my vault has like 2-3 places. I seriously don't have more room for another loot table of raid loot. Like, I just don't have room for that. And this is a crazy topic because every time you bring this up, you get people very strangely saying, oh, well, my vault is clear. My vault is clear. I don't need vault space. But how does adding vault space impact anyone negatively? It's only a positive thing. More vault space is only good. You either greatly help the people who need more vault space out, people like me who are collectors, who want to do a bunch of fun stuff, like for example, you can still go back and play the level 28 Prison of Elders, and you get year 1 loot. That's so cool, that's so much fun, and these are super rare collector's items, And if you're not improving vault space, you basically eliminate that activity. Yes, you don't necessarily need those items. You can still use them actually in PvP, and you could get really good PvP stuff like the High Road Soldier Scout Rifle. It's actually very competitive. But again, not increasing vault space basically eliminates that very fun activity from Destiny. You can't realistically do it because the loot you get, you have nowhere to put it. So again, adding more vault space is only beneficial, helping those who need it out, and then basically helping everyone out, because in the future, if you actually keep playing the game and keep collecting loot, you're going to eventually need more vault space. And if you're really someone who cleans out their vault every time and just keeps like the only few weapons that are current in the meta, and you just hating on everyone else and you don't want vault space, you're just being a jerk. Because again, it doesn't impact you negatively. It only helps other people. That's like saying they shouldn't have fucking sidewalk crossings because I always look both ways. You're being a jerk, okay? Add vault space. It can only help. It's something that's well overdue, and it's just something that's totally needed for Destiny's longevity. Tons of people are collectors, and tons of people have stopped playing the game because they aren't able to do the activities they want to do because their vault is literally full. And that is ridiculous. And so guys, that's it for the 4 things I think the Age of Triumph really needs to have. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you agree with what I'm saying, please remember to support this video. Yes, it's kind of too late along in the timeline for Bungie to implement these things if they haven't, but hopefully we'll be able to hold them accountable because, again, these are very common sense things to do that they should be doing anyways, and it's not too late. They're introducing Age of Triumph in March. There's still a substantial amount of time until Destiny 2, and adding another Age of Triumph or April update style of update later, sometime in June, sometime in July, is not that unreasonable. So they could nail these things down the road as well. Furthermore, guys, I want to say that I am becoming a real live YouTuber because I actually got my own merchandise. So if you're interested in getting that, supporting the channel and myself, that'll be linked in the description down below. Also use the code you're seeing on screen and you'll get 10% off until March 13th. Also, I will be attending GuardianCon 2017 in Florida at the end of June, so if I see anyone there wearing the Kackis HD merch, I will definitely come up and say hello. So again, guys, that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did and want to see more Destiny content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. Now, if you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickKackis. That's linked in the description down below, as is my Twitch channel, which you can also follow. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.